I want you to imagine the smell, not the sterile, sharp smell of rubbing alcohol. That's what they use in the movies. I'm talking about the real smell of the emergency room at Metropolitan General, downtown. It smells like old coffee, desperation, cheap bleach trying to fight a losing battle, and sweat. Always sweat. I was Dr. Elias Thorne, head of trauma, 8 years on the floor. I'm telling you this because you need to understand who I was when this happened. I wasn't some wide-eyed intern. I was the guy you call when the stakes were highest. When the siren stopped and the doors flew open, I was the one standing there, folding my arms, ready to make life or death decisions in a 3-second window. That kind of pressure changes you. It hardens you. You stop seeing people. You start seeing priority codes. You see a gunshot wound, that's a code red. You see a stroke, that's a code blue. You see a broken arm, that's a nuisance waiting in the lobby. And then there are the others, the ones who bring the street in with them. This happened about 2 years ago, right in the middle of a brutal Chicago winter. The kind of cold that doesn't just chill you, it feels like it's stealing the heat right out of your bones. Even inside the hospital. It was a Tuesday night, but Tuesday nights are always the worst. People hold off on coming in over the weekend, thinking they can tough it out, and then Tuesday hits and the whole system explodes. We were running 3 hours behind on triage. I hadn't seen my own desk in 6 hours. My focus was absolute chaos control. I had a teenager in Bay 2 who'd roll his car on the I-90 ramp. Lots of internal bleeding, a tricky surgery coming up. Bay 4 had a little old lady having a massive heart attack, her family screaming outside the curtain. My brain was split into a dozen pieces, tracking vitals, barking orders, signing off charts, all while trying to remember if I'd eaten anything besides a cold granola bar at 11 a.m. Then the doors swung open again. The paramedics brought him in. They wheeled him past Bay 2, past the heart attack, right into the main corridor because there wasn't a clean bay left. He was a black man, probably in his late 50s, maybe early 60s. He was bundled up in so many layers of threadbare coats. You couldn't tell where the man ended and the rags began. His face was hidden mostly by a knitted cap and a thick, matted beard. The smell, though, that was what hit first. It wasn't just body odor. It was a deep chemical stink of living in wet doorways, mixed with stale alcohol and something sickly sweet, like decay. He was conscious, but barely. He was shivering violently, not just in the cold, but the deep, internal tremors that speak of severe systemic distress. Dr. Thorne, Nurse Sarah called out. She was pushing the gurney. Sarah was the best of Real Rock, but even she looked strained tonight. Found him sleeping behind the old post office. Hypothermia, obviously, and he's complaining of severe abdominal pain. Seems malnourished. I walked over. I didn't stop walking. I just slowed my pace as I circled the gurney, my eyes already scanning past him to the digital board showing the critical cases. I didn't introduce myself. I didn't reach out. I just looked down at him. He opened his eyes slightly. They were bloodshot and tired, but there was a flicker of fear there, too. He tried to say something, a sort of wet, raspy sound, but it caught in his throat. "Sir, can you tell me what hurts?" I asked, my voice professionally neutral, maybe a little too clipped. He managed to lift a trembling hand and press it against his lower right abdomen. "Stomach, bad," he whispered. His breath smelled like a brewery and old cigarettes. My mind immediately began running the checklist of the street population. Alcohol withdrawal, pancreatitis, maybe an abscess from an infected drug injection site, or just gas and severe hunger. 99% of the time, it was something chronic, something that required social services and detox, not the trauma bay. I was running on a deficit of personnel and time. I had two lives hanging in the balance, and this man, this nameless, dirty man who couldn't even keep his clothes on straight, was going to suck up 2 hours of my time for a basic workup, blood test, and then we'd call the shelter. My cynicism kicked in. It was a defense mechanism, really. If you let yourself feel the weight of every broken life that rolls through those doors, you never make it through a shift. You have to compartmentalize. You have to prioritize the fixable. Sarah, I said, stepping back, already turning toward the teenager in Bay 2. Get him settled into Triage 5. Get him warmed up blankets for fluids. Run a full panel, blood sugar, tox screen. Give him 50 milligrams of Demerol for the pain. But don't tie up a nurse doing a full abdominal CT right now. We have 2 criticals waiting. Sarah frowned. I could see the question in her eyes. Triage 5 was basically the overflow cupboard. It was where we put the non-emergencies until we could get to them. Dr. Thorne, he's presenting with acute abdominal pain and severe hypothermia. She pushed back softly. She knew the protocol. And he's stable enough to wait, I countered, my voice firm. I didn't shout, but I used a tone that told her the discussion was over. The kid in Bay 2 is crashing. The lady in Bay 4 is seizing. I need you focused on the actual emergencies. Sarah, this man needs warmth and food more than he needs me right now. Just keep him comfortable until we clear the deck. I didn't wait for her reply. I couldn't afford to. I pivoted and strode back into the intensity of the trauma wing. I knew what I was doing. I was making a calculated decision based on perceived risk and resource allocation. It was a correct decision, medically speaking, if you only looked at the surface. I judge him by his appearance, by the smell, by the file history of men like him who drained hospital resources. I refused to treat him immediately. I deferred him. In the high-stakes world of the ER, deferral is often a polite word for dismissal. I spent the next 4 hours in the operating room, standing over the teenager, pulling off a near-miracle repair job on a lacerated spleen. When I finally emerged, bone-tired and smelling faintly of blood and iron, the clock was pushing 3:30 a.m. The ER had quieted down to a low, miserable hum. The chaos had receded, leaving behind the exhausted staff and the lingering smell of misery. I walked past Triage 5 on my way to the doctor's lounge. The door was slightly ajar. I glanced in. The homeless man, I never even learned his name then, was still there. He was tucked under a pile of thick thermal blankets. The foredrip was running. He looked slightly less gray, but he was still curled tightly, his breathing shallow. Nurse Sarah was sitting beside him, not checking monitors, just sitting. She had a small plastic cup of water ready, and she was watching him with that deep maternal concern that some nurses possess, the kind that doctors usually lose somewhere around their 3rd year of residency. She looked up and saw me. Her expression was unreadable, but I felt a familiar flash of irritation. I didn't like being judged by my subordinates. "How is he?" I asked, purely professional curiosity. "Better hydrated," she murmured. "He's still complaining about the pain." I gave him the Demerol you ordered, but it didn't touch it. "I think we need that CT, doctor." I sighed, rubbing the bridge of my nose. I was done. My shift was technically over at 4 a.m., and I was running on fumes. "Sarah, we're short-staffed in radiology until morning. If he's stable, he can wait until Dr. Chen arrives at 7. Keep monitoring his vitals. If anything drops, you call me, but I doubt it will." I gave her a curt nod and kept walking. That was the extent of my involvement with him that night. I made a snap decision based on appearance and convenience, prioritized the bleeding over the suffering, and then I went home. My home is a quiet place in the suburbs, 20 minutes outside the city noise. It's a beautiful house, modern kitchen, big yard. I worked hard for that house. I worked 18-hour shifts, missed holidays, and sacrifice relationships for that level of success. I deserved the quiet. I showered off the hospital smell, poured myself a glass of expensive bourbon, and sat on the couch in the dark, letting the silence drain the tension from my shoulders. I didn't think about the homeless man. Why would I? He was just another broken piece of the city I had temporarily patched up and sent back into system. My job was to save lives, and tonight I had saved 2 critical ones. The man in Triage 5 was just noise. The next morning, I woke up feeling rested, if a little stiff. I drove back to the hospital for my rounds. The first thing I did was check the daily log. I scanned for my patients. The teenager was stable. The heart attack patient was moved to ICU. Then I looked for Triage 5. The entry was simple. Asterisk patient transferred to city shelter, 9:30 a.m. Discharged by Dr. Chun. Asterisk Dr. Chun was a morning shift physician. He was known for being fast and efficient. Often too fast, in my opinion. He must have done a quick check, confirmed the man was stable and conscious, and then followed the standard protocol. No critical signs, no insurance. Out the door. I felt a brief, tiny flicker of something. Was it guilt? No. Relief. Relief that the problem had been solved. Cleared from my roster, without taking up any more of my resources. I spent the next 2 weeks living my life. It was a blur of high-stakes trauma, paperwork, and trying to keep my social life from completely collapsing. The man from Triage 5 was entirely forgotten. He was just a ghost in the vast, overwhelming machine of the ER. But life, as I've learned, has a cruel sense of dramatic timing. 2 weeks after the night I refused to give him the time of day, I was sitting in my office, trying to catch up on administrative duties. The stuff no doctor ever wants to do. It was mid-afternoon, quiet enough that I could actually hear the distant sound of a siren approaching the building. My phone buzzed. It was an internal call from the Chief of Staff, Dr. Evelyn Reyes. Dr. Reyes was a legend, sharp, demanding, and utterly ruthless when it came to hospital policy and reputation. When she called, you answered immediately. Thorne, get down to the conference room, level 3, now. Her voice was tight, professional, but beneath the surface, I heard a tremor of panic. Is everything all right, Chief? I asked, standing up quickly. No, Elias. Everything is absolutely not all right. We have a situation. A very public, very bad situation. I grabbed my white coat and headed toward the elevator, my stomach suddenly twisting with apprehension. When the Chief of Staff uses your first name and sounds panicked, it means a hospital is facing a crisis that might involve lawyers or the evening news. I walked into the conference room. It wasn't the usual small meeting room. It was the big one, the one with the panoramic view of the city, usually reserved for board meetings and donor presentations. The room was packed. Dr. Reyes was standing at the head of the long mahogany table. Flanked by 3 people in expensive suits, I immediately recognized as the hospital's legal team. There was also a police detective, a serious, tired-looking man, and the hospital administrator, Mr. Peterson, whose face was pale and slick with sweat. The atmosphere was thick, heavy, like the air before a lightning strike. Elias, thank you for coming, Dr. Reyes said, her voice dropping to a low, serious register. Please sit down. I took the nearest empty seat, my eyes darting around the room, trying to find the source of catastrophe. We are dealing with a critical incident, Dr. Reyes began, folding her hands on the table. 2 weeks ago, we had a patient present in the ER, a black male, homeless, suffering from hypothermia and severe abdominal pain. My blood ran cold. The man, him. You reviewed the case, Dr. Thorne, she continued, her gaze fixed on me. You were the attending physician when he arrived. You deferred the full workup. I swallowed hard. Chief, that night was pure chaos. We had 2 critical trauma cases. I stabilized him, ordered fluids and pain medication, and prioritized the active trauma. He was stable. He was stabilized enough for Dr. Chun to discharge him the next morning. Yes, Dr. Reyes conceded, leaning forward. But he wasn't stable enough, Elias. Not at all. The legal team shifted uncomfortably. The detective just watched me, his expression neutral. What happened? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I knew, instinctively, that whatever they were about to tell me was going to be bad. Lawsuits, probably. Maybe he died out on the street. The patient's name was Silas Jennings. Dr. Reyes said slowly, pronouncing the name with deliberate weight. Mr. Jennings was discharged from Metropolitan General at 9:30 a.m. 2 weeks ago. He returned to the shelter, where he collapsed later that afternoon. She paused, letting the implications sink in. He was taken to St. Jude's Hospital across town. They immediately performed a CT scan. Elias. Mr. Jennings did not have pancreatitis or alcohol withdrawal. He had a severe, rapidly progressing case of necrotizing fasciitis, a flesh-eating bacteria that started in his lower abdominal wall, likely due to an old, neglected injury. The infection was spreading through his tissue at an alarming rate. Necrotizing fasciitis. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. It requires immediate, aggressive surgical debridement. If you wait even a few hours, the patient dies. St. Jude's took him to surgery immediately. Dr. Reyes continued, her voice now edged with accusation. But it was too late. The infection had become septic. They removed a significant amount of tissue, but he went into multi-system organ failure on the table. Mr. Jennings died 12 hours later. Silence. The only sound in the room was the low hum of the air conditioning. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. I had missed it. I had been so convinced he was just another drunk with a stomach ache that I had dismissed a life-threatening, time-sensitive bacterial infection. I had looked at the grime, the clothes, and the smell, and I had seen a societal problem, not a medical emergency. And that dismissal had killed him. This is malpractice, Doctor. One of the lawyers, a severe woman named Ms. Chun, no relation to the other doctor, stated bluntly, we are facing a wrongful death suit. St. Jude's medical team has already noted in their records that the condition would have been immediately visible on a CT scan and treatable if caught earlier. They are clear that the delay in diagnosis at MetroGen contributed directly to his death. I stabilized him. I stammered, feeling my defense crumble around me. We followed the triage protocol based on the resources available. You prioritize a stable trauma patient over a man presented with acute, undiagnosed abdominal pain. Dr. Reyes corrected me sharply. You made a judgment call, Elias, and it was a fatal one. We are in damage control. The detective finally spoke, his voice deep and quiet. Dr. Thorne, we aren't here about the malpractice suit. That's civil. I'm Detective Miller. I'm here because of who Mr. Jennings was. Or, rather, who he wasn't. I stared at him, confused. What did he mean, who he wasn't? He was a homeless man who died because I was arrogant. That was the whole story. Mr. Jennings was identified through fingerprints after his death at St. Jude's, Detective Miller explained. And that's where this case gets complicated for you, Doctor, and for the hospital. He slid a glossy photograph across the table toward me. It was a picture of a man younger than the one I saw, wearing a pristine Marine Corps uniform. He was smiling, handsome, with a powerful, confident stance. Silas Jennings was a decorated veteran of the Gulf War, Miller said. He suffered severe traumatic brain injury during an IED attack that led to chronic PTSD and subsequent severe homelessness and addiction. He had family, wealthy family, and they are absolutely furious. My heart hammered against my ribs. A veteran, a war hero, The media would have a field day with this. Hero left to die on the street by arrogant city doctor. My career, my reputation, everything I had built was dissolving into dust right there on the mahogany table. The Jennings family is not just suing us for negligence, Dr. Reyes said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. They are demanding a full public investigation into our triage policies and your conduct, Elias. They claim systemic bias. They claim that if he had arrived in a suit, he would have been saved. And they were right. If a man in a Brooks Brothers suit had walked in complaining of that exact pain, I would have ordered the CT immediately. I wouldn't have dared to defer him. I felt sick. My arrogance had not just cost a life. It was going to cost the hospital millions and destroy my career. We need to prepare a defense, the lawyer, Ms. Chun, said, her eyes narrowed. Dr. Thorne, you need to write a detailed statement explaining your exact reasoning for deferring the CT. We need to show that this was a medical decision based on vitals, not appearance. I nodded numbly, trying to pull my professional facade back up, but the image of Silas Jennings, shivering and begging for help, was now seared into my memory. I spent the rest of the day in a nightmare haze, locked in that conference room, dictating my defense, rationalizing my choices, trying to paint a picture of controlled, responsible triage process. But the truth was, I had failed. I had judged a man unworthy of my best effort, and he had died for it. The fallout was immediate. The local news picked up the story within 48 hours. The hospital was swarming with reporters. Dr. Reyes put me on administrative leave, pending investigation. I went home. My beautiful, quiet home suddenly felt like a cage. Every time I turned on the television, there was Silas Jennings' smiling face in uniform, juxtaposed with a picture of the sprawling, expensive Metropolitan General Hospital. The general public was outraged. The social media campaign was brutal. My name, Dr. Elias Thorne, became synonymous with callousness and elitism. My phone wouldn't stop ringing, not with congratulations, but with threats and hate mail. I lost friends. I lost my standing. My entire life, built on the premise of being a lifesaver, had been undone by one terrible, biased decision. 2 weeks passed this way, a slow, agonizing public execution. I was preparing for the civil deposition, prepping for the inevitable end of my medical career. I had already started looking at teaching positions in community colleges, thinking about how I could possibly reinvent myself. I was sitting alone in my kitchen, staring blankly out the window at the snow-covered yard, when the doorbell rang. I rarely answered the door anymore. Everyone who wanted to talk to me was either a lawyer or a reporter, but this time, something felt different. I got up, walked to the door, and peered through the peephole. Standing on my porch was a man. He was impeccably dressed in a dark wool coat and a tailored suit. He looked expensive, dignified, and deeply sad. He was holding a small, worn, leather-bound book. I opened the door just a crack. "Can I help you?" "Dr. Thorne," the man asked. His voice was soft, educated. "My name is David Jennings. I was Silas's younger brother." My stomach dropped again. The family. I knew he was here to look me in the eye, to tell me I was a murderer. I deserved it. "Mr. Jennings, I am so sorry for your loss." "I truly am." I began, ready to deliver my practice, humble apology. He held up a hand, stopping me. "I didn't come here for an apology, doctor. I came here because I need to show you something. Something about Silas that no one at the hospital knew. Something that changes everything." I hesitated. This was either a trap set by the lawyers, or it was something truly significant. The intense grief in his eyes looked genuine. I opened the door fully. "Please, come in, Mr. Jennings." He stepped inside, shaking the snow from his coat. He looked around my expensive living room, but there was no judgment in his eyes, only profound weariness. Silas. He was a brilliant man before the war destroyed him. David started sitting down on the edge of my sofa. But even when he was living on the street, he never stopped being a good man. He was always looking out for others. He handed me the small leather book. It was a diary, old and scuffed, clearly having survived years of harsh weather. "This is Silas's journal," David explained. "We found it in his things at the shelter after he died. He wrote in it every single day, right up until the end." I opened the journal carefully. The handwriting was neat, precise, almost scholarly, contrasting sharply with the man I had seen on the gurney. "Turn to the last entry, Doctor," David instructed, his voice thick with emotion. I flipped through the final pages until I found the date. The night he was in my ER. The entry was short, scrawled right before he collapsed the next morning. I read the words, and as I read them, the world tilted on its axis. Everything I thought I knew about that night, about Silas Jennings, about my own culpability, evaporated, because what Silas Jennings had written in his final journal entry was something no one, not the lawyers, not the police, not the chief of staff, and certainly not me, would ever have believed. He wrote about the night he was in the ER, yes, but he didn't write about the pain in his stomach. He wrote about a little girl. "I saw the little girl tonight, Doc," the entry began. "She was cold, hiding in the corner near the big glass doors, crying. Her daddy was busy. I knew what she needed. I gave her my coat. The good one, the one with the lining. She stopped crying. I waited until the nice lady, the nurse, came and talked to her. I knew the cold would be bad, but the little girl needed the coat more than I did. I hope they find her daddy." I looked up at David, my mind racing. A little girl? I hadn't seen a little girl. Silas didn't have hypothermia. "Doctor," not initially, David said, pointing to the entry. He gave away his warmest coat in the single-digit weather to a child who was lost near the hospital entrance. He traded his life for her comfort. That's why he was shivering violently when he arrived. He was already freezing when he lay down behind the post office, just hours later. My breath hitched. I had judged him as a selfish drunk, a drain on society. He was a hero one last time, sacrificing the only thing of value he possessed, his warmth, for a stranger. But that wasn't the detail that truly broke me. David pointed a trembling finger at the very last line of the entry, written in a shaky, almost illegible hand. "Read this, Doctor," David urged. "This is why I came here. This is what you need to understand." I leaned closer, my eyes blurring, and read the final sentence Silas Jennings ever wrote. It was a detail so bizarre, so impossible, that for a long moment, I thought the cold, the pain, or the infection must have driven him mad. It described a conversation he had with someone, not the nurse, not the doctor, someone else, someone who shouldn't have been there. And that conversation was about me. And then I understood why David said that this information changed everything. Because it meant the death of Silas Jennings was not just a medical tragedy or a mistake of prioritization. It was the beginning of something truly unbelievable. Something that would reach far beyond the walls of Metropolitan General. I leaned closer, my eyes blurring, and read the final sentence Silas Jennings ever wrote. It was a detail so bizarre, so impossible, that for a long moment I thought the cold, the pain, or the infection must have driven him mad. It wasn't a rambling prayer or a political statement. It was a single, crystal clear sentence written right below the note about the little girl and the coat. Asterisk. The man said to tell Dr. Thorne that the gold locket is safe, but he needs to forgive Maria for the rain. Asterisk. I dropped the journal. It hit my thick carpet with a soft thud. The air went out of the room. I felt dizzy, like I was suddenly back in the operating theater, watching a patient flatline. "What?" I whispered, staring at David Jennings. What did you just say? I didn't say it, Doctor. Silas did, David replied, his eyes steady, but filled with the same unanswerable mystery that was gripping me. You recognize the names, don't you? Maria. Maria was my wife. She had died 4 years earlier. A sudden, terrible car accident on the I-94 during a brutal downpour. I had always blamed myself for asking her to pick up my dry cleaning that night. The guilt was a physical thing I carried every day. No one, absolutely no one outside of my therapist and my closest friend, who was currently refusing to return my calls, knew the extent of my self-blame or the specific details of that night. And the gold locket? It was Maria's mother's locket. It had been lost in the crash, never recovered. I had searched the wrecking yard myself, tearing through the metal, hoping to find that one small piece of her history. I had never told anyone I was still searching for it, still keeping that tiny hope alive. Who is the man? I demanded, my voice shaking now, no longer with fear of the lawsuit, but with a sudden, profound terror of the unknown. Who told him that? David sighed, leaning back against the sofa cushions. He looked less like an angry plaintiff and more like a man who had seen a ghost. That's the impossible part, Doctor. Silas was found alone. The nurses confirmed he didn't have any visitors. He was barely conscious when he wrote this, but he did write it. I picked up the journal again, my hands trembling as I traced the precise, neat script of the final line. Forgive Maria for the rain. When we went through his things, we initially thought it was just the ravings of a sick man. David continued softly. But then we realized how specific the details were. The names, the locket. That's when I knew I had come here. But who was he talking to? I pressed. A hallucination? A priest? Did he talk to another patient? No one saw him speak to anyone of consequence, David insisted. But look at the context, Doctor. Silas was a man of deep faith, even in his darkest days. He was dying rapidly of a horrific infection that was burning him alive. His final conscious act was one of self-sacrifice for a child he didn't know. And his final words were a message of forgiveness for the doctor who had just dismissed him. I sat back, utterly speechless. The professional, calculating shell I had built around myself over 2 decades of trauma medicine shattered completely. I had looked at Silas Jennings and seen filth, addiction, and inconvenience. I had judged him by his cover, by his smell, and this man in his final, agonizing hours had somehow received an impossible message intended to heal me. Why? Why would the universe or God or whatever force was at play use this dying, neglected man to deliver a message of such intimate, specific grace to the man who had failed him? I don't understand, I finally admitted, running a hand over my face. It doesn't make sense. Maybe it's not supposed to, David said, standing up. He looked down at me with an expression that wasn't hatred, but deep, sorrowful pity. My brother died because the system failed him, and you were the face of that system that night. You made the wrong choice, Dr. Thorne. But Silas's final words were not about revenge or blame. They were about forgiveness. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle between us. We, the family, were going to use this journal entry in court to show the world the depth of his character, to juxtapose his heroism with the hospital's callousness, David admitted. But after reading that last line, I can't. This isn't evidence for a lawsuit. Doctor, this is something else entirely. David picked up the journal, tucking it securely under his arm. The money doesn't matter anymore. The lawsuit will proceed, but will be purely against the hospital's policy and infrastructure, not against you, personally, for systemic bias. I will ensure the narrative changes. I will tell the lawyers that my brother understood the chaos of the ER, and that he held no malice towards you, only grace. I stood up, my knees weak. You're dropping the personal negligence claim? I am changing the focus, David corrected. I won't lie for you. Doctor, you made a fatal mistake based on prejudice. But I also won't let my brother's final moments be used to fuel the kind of hatred that only leads to more division. Silas was trying to save you, Elias, not from the law, but from the guilt that was killing you inside. He walked toward the door. I followed him, my mind spinning with the implications. The public humiliation, the career destruction. It was still coming, but the worst, most vicious personal attack was being pulled back by the very family I had wronged. Mr. Jennings, wait. I said, where did he get that information? The locket? The ring? David turned back, his hand on the doorknob. His eyes were distant, looking past me, perhaps seeing his brother in his mind. Silas always said that when you are alone, truly alone, and you are facing death, the noise of the world stops. And sometimes, if you listen hard enough, the truth finds its way in. Maybe he spoke to an angel. Maybe he spoke to Maria. Maybe he spoke to your own subconscious fear manifested in the hallway. I don't know. He opened the door, letting a blast of cold air into my warm house. But I do know this, Dr. Thorne. You saw a homeless man and refused to give him time. He saw a doctor in deep spiritual pain, and in his last act, he gave you forgiveness. Now, you have to decide what you're going to do with that gift. And then David Jennings was gone, leaving me standing in the doorway, staring out at the suburban street, holding the impossible truth of Silas Jennings' final message. The legal fallout was unavoidable, but David Jennings kept his word. The Jennings family still pursued the wrongful death suit, but they focused their press conferences entirely on systemic failures and the critical need for better mental health and veteran support, refusing to demonize me personally. They emphasized Silas's heroism, the coat, the little girl, who was later identified and found safe. The narrative shifted slightly from arrogant doctor kills homeless man to systemic failure claims veteran hero. But for me, the damage was done and the transformation was total. I couldn't unsee my own arrogance. I couldn't unsmell the stench of decay and neglect that I had dismissed. And I certainly couldn't forget the impossible grace of that final journal entry. I resigned from Metropolitan General 2 weeks later. It wasn't mandated, but it was inevitable. I stood before Dr. Reyes and Mr. Peterson, not offering excuses, but stark truth. I failed my oath, I told them. I stopped seeing a human being. I saw a category, and that category cost a man his life. They tried to save my career, offer me a consulting position, a quiet way out. I refused. I needed to burn the old Elias Thorne to the ground. The money from my settlement, the hospital paid a massive sum to the Jennings family, felt tainted. I sold the house in the suburbs. The quiet luxury suddenly felt like a heavy, suffocating shroud. I took a small apartment closer to the city, not far from where Silas used to sleep, and I began the work of genuine atonement. I used the bulk of my savings, supplemented by the sale of my house, to establish the Silas Jennings Memorial Clinic. It wasn't a fancy trauma center. It was a small, free clinic focused specifically on providing immediate, no-questions-asked medical and psychological care for homeless veterans in the Chicago area. I worked there myself. I was the attending physician, the administrator, and sometimes the janitor. I wore simple scrubs and a cheap fleece jacket. No white coat. The work was grueling and often heartbreaking. I dealt with the exact population I had once scorned: the addicted, the mentally ill, the neglected. But now I saw them. I looked them in the eye, and I didn't see a nuisance code. I saw the suffering, fragile human being underneath. I learned the names of every patient. I learned their stories. I remembered Silas Jennings every time I smelled the mix of stale alcohol and damp wool. It was a cold, rainy Tuesday night, about 9 months after Silas died, that the unbelievable happened again. I was closing up the clinic, tired, when I heard a faint tapping on the glass door. I opened it to find a young woman standing there, drenched, holding a small, terrified little girl by the hand. The girl was wearing a clean but clearly oversized coat. "Dr. Thorne?" the woman asked, her voice cautious. "I'm sorry we're late, but I heard you never turn anyone away." "We're open," I said, stepping aside. "What can I do for you?" The woman explained that the little girl, her niece, had a nasty fever. As I checked the girl's temperature, the woman nervously fiddled with something in her hand. "This is going to sound crazy, doctor," the woman started, "but I need to show you something. My niece, Lily. She was a little girl who got lost near Metropolitan General last winter. Her dad was picking up prescription, and she wandered off near the main entrance." My heart hammered. The little girl Silas saved. "Yes, I remember the incident," I said, try to keep my voice calm. "Well, a few weeks ago, she was playing outside, digging the dirt in our backyard. We live in the city near the old post office, actually, and she found this." The woman opened her hand. Lying in her palm was a small gold locket. It was tarnished and scarred, but unmistakable. Maria's locket. I couldn't breathe. "It was buried shallow," the woman said, confused by my reaction. I was going to take it to the police, but I saw this clinic's name, Silas Jennings Memorial, and Lily said she remembered the kind, cold man who gave her his coat. She said she told him about my Aunt Maria who lost her shiny necklace, and he told her not to worry, that the nice doctor would find it. I took the locket from her hand. It was cold, heavy, and real. The rain, the locket, the impossible message. Silas hadn't spoken to an angel or a hallucination. He had spoken to a lost little girl who, in her innocent chatter, had accidentally given him precise, specific keys to my deepest, most buried grief. The little girl hadn't known she was talking about Dr. Elias Thorne's wife. She had just been talking about Aunt Maria. Silas, in his final moments of lucidity, dying from cold and pain, had taken those random, disparate pieces of information, the locket, the rain, Maria, and woven them into a final, impossible message intended not to save his own life, but to save my soul. He was telling me, the man who had dismissed him, that the things I thought were lost, my wife's memory, my self-forgiveness, were safe. I stood there in the quiet clinic, holding the locket, the physical proof of Silas's final, bizarre act of grace. I had tried to save lives with scalpels and precision. Silas Jennings, the man I deemed unworthy, had saved my life with kindness and an impossible truth. I looked down at the little girl, Lily, who was now smiling up at me, feverish but trusting. "You're going to be just fine, Lily," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I realized then that the chaos of the ER hadn't ruined me. It was my own refusal to see the human being that had, and it had taken a dying man, a homeless hero, to break through my arrogance and show me what true emergency care really meant. I never became the head of trauma again. I lost the house, the prestige, and the title, but I found something far more important. I found Silas's locket, and more importantly, I finally found the ability to forgive Maria for the rain. And in doing so, I finally, truly learned how to be a doctor.